Well, hello friends. Today is mulching day, and you know why it's a good day for that? It's overcast, so it feels a little cooler, not a lot of wind, so it's the perfect day to get out here. Now, I have been bringing you along on this whole front flower bed journey. I have 2 flower beds, and we've really been working on videos on this one. And so the last video I did, I planted all these perennials in here. The first video, I planted trees. Then I came in when perennials started coming into nursery center, like garden centers, and I started planting these perennials. So we have lots of catmint and allium and Russian sage. And now, as you can see, it's just exposed soil. So guess what happens to exposed soil? Weeds grow, things grow. So what I'm gonna do now is finally mulch it. Now, you've heard me in stories, you've heard me on a lot of things. I preach about mulch because I feel like there's a lot of misconceptions. First thing, when I use mulch, I use an untreated, just mulch. I want it all natural, just a wood chip mulch. Now, you can get into things and you can say, I only want hardwood so it lasts maybe a little longer, or for the color. I really honestly just more care that it's an untreated, natural mulch. And honestly, for me, I usually go a little bit more cost effective and don't go just hardwood because that can be a little bit more expensive. So this is an untreated, all natural mulch. And what I'm gonna start doing is adding it to my bed. Now, we add mulch for multiple reasons. It is soil, it helps maintain and retain the moisture in the soil. It also helps suppress the weeds because when you have a nice thick layer on, and on a brand new bed like this where I have no mulch, I'm gonna put about 2 to 3 inches, probably closer to 3 inches if I can, because that's really gonna help keep the weeds down and retain some moisture, which out here in the elements, right at the front with wind, this bed dries out quickly with no mulch. So I want to make sure I spread it out nicely. Now you can see the reason I don't use a treated mulch like with dyes or colorings is because that coloring and that dye and those synthetic oils, they seep into your soil. Think of it like our bodies. You don't want something that's unnatural to seep into it if you don't have to, because that's going to be harder on your plants. You're trying to create really an ecosystem with your soil. So I don't want to do that. So what I'm doing is nicely spreading it around. Now, if I see weeds, I'm gonna pull them out. Yes, it should suppress them, but if I see a little piece of grass growing, pull it out because sometimes grass is so vigorous that it won't. Now, I waited to put any mulch on here until I had everything planted. That may make it look harder because you now have to put it around the plants, but let me tell you something. If I would have put mulch on this whole bed before anything was planted, there would have been a problem. For all these small perennials, if I would have had to move all this, to plant them, move all of the mulch, you would have then gotten a lot of soil mixed into the mulch. So once these are all planted, it's a great time to add the mulch because I don't want to get soil mixed into it. If too much soil would be mixed into the mulch, weeds would want to start growing easier in it and it wouldn't really do what it should. So what I'm going to do is keep placing this around, and I'm going to make sure to be careful, and I'm going to make sure that I get it nicely around my perennials and not cover them up. That's the big thing here, is you don't want to cover them up. So instead of like taking this and just dumping it on top, that could break perennials. You want to make sure you nicely put them around. And you don't want the perennials to be completely covered because that could actually suffocate them. You want to give them, just like you would other things, a nice area around them. So I'm going to keep putting some mulch, and then we're going to talk about the trees and how we mulch those. So I'm getting my last scoop here. You can tell it gets a little hot out sometimes and you get sweaty, but that's the fun part. So when I am thinking of putting my last one on, you probably wonder, well, how much does it take? And that can be different because I'm buying in bulk, but a lot of people are gonna buy this in bags. So if you're buying it in bags, they usually come in a 2 cubic foot bag. And if you wanna cover it 2 inches, it covers about 12 square feet. 3 inches, probably about 8 square feet. And that's a rough estimate, but that's, you could calculate your square feet to know how many bags you need to get. Now, as I'm putting it on this tree, I think trees are super important to know something about. So when you go to shopping centers, when you sometimes go to these areas where people just quickly mulch trees, you're gonna see this, just thrown up around the tree. Now, if you see me plant a tree, you know I take a lot of time to expose that root flare. That works with mulch too. You do not want to mulch like this because you know what this does? It actually suffocates a tree. And you may think, well, my tree looks fine and I do that. Sometimes it takes 10 plus years, but that suffocation over time will eventually kill the tree. And it can be a large tree sometimes it kills. So if you're going to take the time to plant it correctly, you want to take the time to mulch it correctly. And that means if you look here, I'm going to lightly cover down by that, but look, I'm keeping that root flare still exposed. So this is exposed, that root flare is exposed, but there's just mulch right up to it, and that's the perfect thing. Don't volcano mulch it or make a mushroom around it. You want to keep this exposed because when you put mulch up to it or soil, whatever it is, that harbors moisture, which can harbor disease, little insects, things like that. Let this breathe. It gets the right amount of oxygen that it needs because trees need oxygen too. So my next bit of info, you're going to notice I did not put down landscape fabric. Underneath this mulch is still soil. Now, to me, the whole point of a hardwood mulch is what? So it can slowly compost into the soil and actually add something to your soil. If you're putting down a fabric or a plastic, you're stopping that process. And it's just gonna be more of a mess for you later on. If you put down a good 3-inch layer of mulch to begin with, you're gonna have the weed suppression, the moisture retention without any fabric or anything underneath. Now, if you're doing rock or something else, you're gonna want that plastic or landscape fabric. And in certain areas, like if you have wildfires or termites, things like that, you don't want wood mulch. So you have to look what your area needs, obviously, and make it work for you. Now, another big thing I'm going to talk about is year to year. So every year we all have this moment where we feel like, oh, it's nice out. My mulch looks gray, maybe kind of white, and I want to go and just get tons of new bags and throw it on top, and then it looks fresh. What that does is actually stop and inhibit the process of hardwood mulch being able to compost and being able to do its natural thing. So all you need to do yearly, if you still have a nice 2 to 3 inch layer of mulch, take a rake. Take a rake and go in and rake up your mulch. It will make it look fresh. It will break up that cakey layered mulch. If you just keep adding mulch layers, you one, start inhibiting and getting too high up on plants. Two, you create these cakey layers that have moisture and mold and mildew, and again, harbor disease, harbor insects. You don't want to do that. Instead, if you have a good thick layer still of mulch, 2 to 3 inches, don't get fresh mulch. Go in and rake it, give it a fresh look, and let it do its thing. You don't need to add mulch every year. Now, this bed had no mulch. I needed mulch. I have a bed up by the house that was mulched years ago, hasn't been mulched since. I've been working in it. It needs mulch again too. So you just have to assess what you need, but don't just assume you need. We don't have to fall pressure to trends and say, well, if my neighbor's making it look fresh, I need to. No, do what's best for the soil, do what's best for your plants in your garden. That's what's gonna be best. Now, a small rake like this can also help you if you don't wanna bend over and that's a lot of work. You can use a rake to spread this mulch out. Now, you're gonna notice, I edge my beds with a half moon edger. I talk about this all the time, I love these. Now, these are work. So I have this nice edge here that I went around and made a deep cut all the way around. I keep it exposed. Now, you're gonna say, well, isn't that hard because this is kind of mounded? In best case scenario, you don't have a big mound, but I still am keeping this open and free. I'm not gonna take my mulch and just push it all the way against it. When you do that, that creates a medium for these roots from this grass to grow over into your bed. I just slightly mulch up to it, like a thin layer at the bottom, but keep this cut edge exposed. And that's gonna help these roots harden off and not jump over into this bed. It sounds like work, and if it's a big mound and in big heavy rains, it could wash down. It's a possibility, and I'll come out and I'll push it back if I have to. For me, I try to make so my beds aren't too high and so it doesn't wash. And as mulch sits and gets weather on it, it will kind of solidify a little bit and tack together. So as you can see, mulching, yeah, it takes a little bit of elbow grease. It takes a little bit of work, but that's the fun part because now look, what it does is it really sets off the plants. You now can see all the individual perennials I planted, but also what it really does is protect them. It suppresses the weeds from taking over. It helps retain moisture in the soil. It actually acts, if you're using a good natural a good natural hardwood or a good natural chipped wood, it's gonna slowly compost and actually add some almost compost-like material to your beds, which is super important. So this is doing so many duties. We have it free of the root flare. We have a good 3-inch layer to help really lock in that moisture, and we're gonna be happy. So as always, thanks for watching the videos, but thanks most of all for sharing these videos. When you share them, it helps me a lot, but guess what? It helps other people see, if this guy can do this in Iowa, anyone can do this. It's just mulch, it's just gardening, it's doable. Check my website, wyseguide.com, for tips, for tricks, and yes, for food too. It's all on there. Until next time, go do something in the garden. It'll make you feel good.